Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Couch GMs podcast on Wednesday, June 22nd, 2022. I'm your host, George Kerth, joined by the two other matching best friends, Tyler Snyder and Cody Roadcap. Guys, we really coordinated well today, didn't we?
It was unplanned.
Totally unplanned. Yeah.
And the shirts were made by none other than Cody Roadcap.
And some
anybody,
random Asian website.
But if anybody likes the shirts, maybe give us a shout out. Maybe we'll find ways to do some giveaways or some sales if people are interested. You just got to let us know.
Anything to spread the word. Yes, guys, let us know. Get involved with the podcast. But I'm not going to go further into that because Tyler does that at the end of the show. At the beginning of the show, we talk about what we're covering, and we're going to hit some NFL news and notes, and we're getting into the wide receiver position today. 1 through 15 on our early wide receiver rankings on today's show, and then next week we'll hit 16 to 30. Make sure you get a sneak peek here and check out the couchgms.com where we have through 70 on our website. And check out our social media channels as well. We recently also started TikTok, so you can go check out Tyler's face on TikTok as well as seeing it on the podcast here. Guys, no further ado, let's jump into NFL news. Starting off NFL news with some more retirement news. We've heard a couple of things trickling in throughout the last few weeks. A Buccaneer retired, and it's not Tom Brady again, but it's Rob Gronkowski, officially announcing his retirement on Instagram on Tuesday. We all seemed to think that he was going to come back to play with Tom again, and he proved us wrong. Well, guys, what about the fallout here from Gronkowski?
There's really one big question that looms. It's the most important question of all, and it is, will he return to the WWE? That's what we really need to know. Is he going to go back and continue his wrestling career? I really hope so. I think he'd add a lot of energy to the WWE, and football has a big following, so it'd help out their fan base as well. But I guess we can talk about the football aspect of it, and I think it does have some repercussions for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, Tom Brady's go-to guy is gone. They've been buddies for years now in the NFL, but at the same time, if you watch Gronk at all last year on the field, he looked slower. He didn't have the same explosiveness he used to have. I think all this is going to do is boost the touchdown potential for everybody else on the team. So we'll talk about some, wide receivers later on that might be benefited by this, but Cody, you have anything else to add on Gronk?
Yeah, I don't fully believe it. Maybe it's just because we've been burned once, but Tom Brady, whether he
burned once with Gronk too.
Well, whether he sits out just the preseason, then he's like, oh, I'm feeling that itch right around week 1. If it's week 8, they're looking like a prime spot for the 1 seed, maybe a late season playoff push if Cameron Brate goes down or something. So I wouldn't rule out Tom Brady. I don't know how to handle that on your dynasty leagues, depending on what your dynasty league rules are. Rob Gronkowski. But I'm not saying I'm running out to drop him on my waivers right away.
Yeah, and especially if you're in a dynasty league, like you said, and you have the ability to retain rights to somebody as they retire, it's not a bad idea. I know I'm kind of going against what we said about Tom Brady earlier in this offseason, like, oh, I don't think you're going to need it. Well, now if that didn't tell you that you should try to retain those rights, do it. A couple other little small retirements here. The Colts, their safety Kyrie Willis retires after 3 seasons. He said that he's going to do something with the church now, so he found a bigger calling after the NFL. Good for him there. And the Bengals quarterback Trey Waynes, he was in the Super Bowl last year. He was debating signing with another team. He is now deciding to retire after 7 seasons in the NFL. Moving on to some other news. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's kind of becoming what you're seeing more often when the concussion age of football, but we don't know if anything to do with that was with these. We're not going to speculate. Other news, another retirement we talked about recently was Ryan Fitzpatrick. It was broken on Tuesday that he is officially joining the Amazon Thursday Night Football crew for their pregame, halftime, and postgame coverages. I love it. He's a great personality. It's nice that he gets to still stay around the league. What do you guys think?
I said it last week or 2 weeks ago whenever we talked about it, but I would love to see him paired up with Pat McAfee. So I'm still hoping that Amazon somehow swings that because I think that'd be a lot of fun. But I'm glad to see he'll be on TV. Hopefully he wears like a different outfit for each team that he was on, or maybe just pulls out the Buccaneers, Deshaun Jackson look for all his TV appearances. That'd be great with me too.
I don't think Pat McAfee is going to sign with anybody. Um, I mean, maybe he will, but he does have a big contract with the WWE. So I don't know if he's going to have the time to be doing games. I guess we'll find out, but it would be cool. And I do love Ryan Fitzpatrick up in the booth. Hopefully, he dresses like he did in the press conference, his iconic photo for every game, or just stays looking iconic every game. Either way, super happy for him. He deserves it, and I'm excited.
So we're all in agreement there, and we're happy to see Ryan Fitzpatrick staying with the league. On lower news here, we have more Deshaun Watson updates. This one, I guess, semi a good update. He officially settled 20 of his 24 lawsuits, but that does not mean that he's going to see no repercussion about those lawsuits from the NFL. A lot of people calling for him to get at least a 1-year suspension. A lot to come with this one. I don't know if there's too much for you guys to add, but go ahead if you like.
Yeah, I just think it's a good point to reemphasize that just because these lawsuits were settled, there was already NFL spokespeople that have come out and said that the settling has no effect on what they were going to do for um, the punishment, and they still want a severe punishment. So, a full season is looking more and more likely.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then Commanders coach Ron Rivera was fined $100,000, and the team lost two 2023 OTA practices for violation of OTA practice rules. George, you want to break this down a little bit?
Yeah, so apparently in the new CBA, OTAs are supposed to be minimal to no contact, and I guess an NFL rep watching the practices said that there was too much contact in their OTAs, turned into a $100,000 fine for Rivera and those loss of practices. Last year, the Cowboys and Mike McCarthy were fined for the same thing, and apparently it kind of flew under the radar, but they were fined again for the exact same thing this season, so he didn't learn his lesson, and that's two NFC East teams with less OTAs next year.
Maybe he just doesn't care. I mean, $100,000 is a drop in the bucket.
Who knows if the team's even feeding him a bonus to cover that kind of thing? Like, you never really know what goes on behind the scenes there. Cody, you seem like you want to say something.
No, I'm and just be careful. We're not saying that's exactly what's happening behind the scenes. I know Dan Snyder's in a lot of heat for himself. We don't need to add fire to saying he's paying the head coach to break CBA rules. But that just goes to show the shadiness that does go all around the NFL. But Commanders quarterback Taylor Heineke, spoke a little wisdom, but came across a little salty to some people when he was asked about, does he see himself being able to compete for the number one job? And he basically said, no, if you're paying a guy $2 million compared to a guy $30 million, it's going to be the $30 million guy job. There's no shot. And it's a harsh truth, but that's the reality in the NFL.
Yeah, and it kind of sucks for Heineke because he really did give it his all these last couple seasons and really made some big plays for Washington. And I know we were all excited about him at one point too. And he really didn't do bad. And it's still not good enough. He didn't have the name to solidify that starting job. Yeah, I mean, if you're a lower name guy or a lower contract guy, you need to really do something that stands out to be able to hold on to that starting job. So I agree, he has no shot. Carson Wentz is going to be the starter for Washington, um, unless Wentz goes down for injury.
Yeah, exactly. But going down for injury, that's something to keep an eye on. We know Wentz has been in that situation before, and there's been, I think, 2 or 3 seasons now where Taylor Heineke did not have a starting job and then became the starter because of an injury. So it's far from over for him. We'll see what ends up happening this season. Couple quick free agent updates before we move on to our rankings. Mostly defense here. The Eagles signed safety Jaquiski Tart. And Larry Ogunjobi, the defensive tackle, signed a 1-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. As Cody generously put on here, it's his new team after a failed physical that he took with the Bears. He also is the guy that shoved Mason Rudolph into Myles Garrett and that whole fiasco where there was a helmet being flung around. Now they're teammates. So
Nice.
Very interesting. I wonder how that locker room interactions are going to go around the first time they meet, don't you think?
Should be pretty interesting. It'll be also interesting to see if Mason Rudolph even makes the team or if he's cut this year now after they signed Trubisky and drafted Kenny Pickett. So they might not be teammates too much longer. But, quarterbacks, I do want to give a quick shout out to one that was released. A lot of you listening are probably like, who are you talking about? But that is Kurt Bankert. Number 3 quarterback for the Green Bay Packers is been released to join another team. And the only reason I'm bringing him up is I want to tell this story one last time because I'm not able to anymore. But his dad gave me my first tattoo. So favorite team, quarterback of my favorite team. His dad gave me my first tattoo. It's sad to see him go. Hopefully he lands on his feet. And reminder that even the third string guys are still people too.
Yes, they are, Cody, and that is still a cool story. I understand why you added it to the rundown now, which is very confused when he literally just had his name on there, and I'm like, well, I don't know why he wants to talk about him. But anyway, what y'all are waiting for, wide receiver rankings 1 to 15. Why don't we jump right in? So if you guys haven't heard our quarterback or running back rankings, make sure you go back to our previous 3 episodes to check them out.
Or
What we're going to do, previous 4 episodes to check them out. But we have consensus rankings we're going to give to you all. We're going to tell you where each of us individually ranked them, and the order is our consensus rankings. We're going to hit 1 to 15 today and 16 to 30 next week, so make sure you stay tuned. But number 1 on our wide receiver rankings is Cooper Kupp. So, man had a dominant year last year. He now reads the top of our rankings. Tyler and I both have him at 1, but Cody, number 2 for Cooper Kupp. I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'll just go out and say right now, 1 through 5 for me can all be interchangeable as wide receiver 1. It's all going to be based on preference. I think they're all capable of finishing the season wide receiver 1. And Cooper Kupp for me is more of just like his season was so phenomenal last year. There's going to be some regression. He's going to be the number 1 wide receiver taken in 99.9% of the drafts. Like I fully understand that, even though I have him as number 2. Still a great player. I'm interested to see, because not that his production went down, like it didn't go down too much once OBJ got involved, but they did add Allen Robinson as a contract, a nice piece. They still have Van Jefferson. There's still rumors that they might be bringing OBJ back, so it could get very crowded very fast, but don't take it away. He did get a new contract. He is the focal point on offense for that team, so I have no issues with you guys having him as number 1.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the easiest picks, I think, for all of the wide receiver rankings. The wide receivers are probably the toughest position to rank, but I do think that Cooper Kupp's an easy number 1. You can make an argument for other people as number 1, but I really don't think there's much to say. I mean, Cooper Kupp has proved himself time and time again. He's a solid pick, and if you take him, you're not going to be upset.
Exactly. And I will reiterate what Cody said. Like, the top 5 are all very good, but I am with Tyler that I think Cooper Kupp is the one guy where it's like, even though he wasn't like the top wide receiver in the past, he's had a lot of very solid seasons, and he finally put it together with a new quarterback. I'm confident he can do it again. And it already was a crowded wide receiver room last year. And you guys got to think, yeah, maybe they did add Allen Robinson such. They got rid of Robert Woods too. We'll see what happens with Odell Beckham, but he's not even going to be there to start the season, even if he signs. He's still dealing with that injury he gained in the Super Bowl. So a lot to talk about with Cooper Kupp, but I think it all comes down to the consensus of he's still right near the top of your list, if not at the top. Number 2, and the person who Cody has at the top of his list, is Justin Jefferson. Tyler has him at 2. I have him at 3. So I don't think I'm really that low on Justin Jefferson compared to you guys. I think that there's a lot to like. I mean, I don't love Kirk Cousins, but this man's just been producing ever since he's been a rookie. Adam Thielen across from him starting to maybe, get a little bit up there in age, lose a step or two, and now Justin Jefferson is definitely the focal point of that offense. There's nothing you can go wrong here, but I don't know if I agree with your number 1, Cody. That's maybe just very slightly too aggressive. I don't know.
Well, it might be a little aggressive, and I understand that, but he is finished top 5 both seasons. You can't say the same about Cooper Kupp. He didn't finish top 5 in 2020, where Justin Jefferson did. He is he's a big part of that offense. He's ascending. He's the first player to have, I believe, 3,000 yards in his first 2 seasons. Like, his trajectory is only up. And the only reason I have him number 1 compared to number 2 with Cooper Kupp is I think there will be a little bit of, regression with Cooper Kupp. I think Justin Jefferson will see about the same, or, he'll stay average or even have a bigger uptick as they, move away from Adam Thielen. Because, first half of his rookie year when he still had a dominant season, he started out as the number 2. So he's only growing, he's only expanding. And it's more just to, bring awareness to where Justin Jefferson is, to, like, you have him at number 3 and he has the potential to be at number 1. So he might be a guy that slips in your draft. And so just to give him the shout out that, hey, this guy could easily be the top wide receiver at the end of the season. Yeah, I know you're relying a lot on Kirk Cousins, but, Kirk Cousins does know how to throw the ball around and get some yards. He might make some boneheaded mistakes, but that doesn't hurt you with Justin Jefferson, because Justin Jefferson is still going to get his.
All right, so take the good notes that Cody gave you, take the downplay that George gave you, and I'm somewhere in the middle with 2. But again, I don't think it's a bad pick at all. Again, I don't think you can go wrong with Justin Jefferson. You take him, you're going to be consistent, you're going to be solid, and you're not going to regret it. So let's start. Let's just keep moving down the list, because honestly, I think some of these later guys are the more interesting debates. Next up, we have Jamar Chase, Cincinnati. Cody has him at 3. I have him at 4. George also has him at 4. My personal notes on him is, I think he might be the best wide receiver in the draft. If not best, he's very close. The only reason I have him at 4 rather than 1 or 2 would be because of the competition. You still got Tyler Boyd, you still got T. Higgins, and it's still a team that likes to run the ball with Joe Mixon. Last year, they wanted to give him like 2,000 carries. Even when Mixon goes down, they still run the ball a lot. So I just feel like there's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense, but it is a very dynamic offense. It's going to be a high-scoring offense, so he's still going to get his points. He's still the top weapon in that offense. Only reason I don't have him higher is the mouths to feed.
I can agree with that. That's probably why I have him down there at 4 as well. Also, the fact that he's a young wide receiver, the sample size is still smaller. Not that that should, like, get you out like, oh, he shouldn't be in the top 5. That's not true. He is definitely a top 5 wide receiver. It's just I have a couple of guys I like better because I like to see that sample size. But this guy is a monster. He's a big play machine. He is best friends with Joe Burrow, and you can see it on the field. I know there was a lot of times last year where, like, I don't know who in the Cincinnati trio to play. By the end of the year, you knew it was Jamar Chase, and the other guys were fighting for that number 2 spot. So their rankings show that he definitely did win that top slot in that Cincinnati depth chart, and he should be in the top slot of your wide receivers in your draft.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm the highest on my at number 3. And you mentioned big playability, take it with however you want. The quote that came out, he said last year he was just out there running routes. Now he's starting to understand the game, and he put up that kind of season his rookie year. The connection with, Joe Burrow has to be, mentioned in this situation with Jamar Chase. Again, you're picking needles right now between Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, and the next guy on the list, or the next 2 guys, to be honest with you, in my opinion. So a lot of good guys. There's a lot of value. This is why I like having, the back half of the draft. You can get a solid running back, you can get a solid wide receiver, or you can double up and get 2 of these guys. And, that's why the no running back strategy is so appealing, because if you're sitting at, pick 8, pick 9, you might be able to get 2 of these top 5 guys. Yeah, your running backs are going to take a hit, but those are some solid playmakers.
Absolutely, Cody. So why don't we go to the next pick? This one I'm definitely interested to talk about. This is the most we vary on anybody so far. So George has him all the way up at 2, Cody at 4. I'm all the way down at 6, and that is Davante Adams, former number 1 wide receiver, now in Las Vegas. George, I'll let you start it off. Why are you so high on Davante Adams?
All right. The man is a catching machine. He is, I know, on a new team. It definitely could be a downgrade at quarterback. I get that. But we saw
It's a
Derek
downgrade.
Carr. It is a downgrade.
I'm sorry. Let's
No.
not say it could be. It's a downgrade.
I was
I
trying
love
to
Derek
play it
Carr,
a little. I was just trying to ease it in a little bit. But yes, it is a downgrade at quarterback. But we saw Derek Carr be able to finally maintain a fantasy relevant wide receiver in Hunter Renfrow last year. And Davante Adams is a big upgrade from that. He's still a possession wide receiver that's going to get a ton of catches. He's still going to get plenty of big plays and score touchdowns too. I know that putting him at 2 is the exact same spot that we had him at when he was in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. And this is probably a bold strategy to keep him that high, but veteran wide receiver is going to be pumped on a new team. I'm just kind of riding into the hype and saying he's going to be just as good as he has before. And Tyler, you're the only one that really shows enough of a hit that I'm like, maybe you think there's going to be a bit of a downgrade.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have him at 6, so it's not like I'm saying, "Oh yeah, Adams is gonna suck this year." Like I'm not saying that at all. But you have to keep in mind we do know the kind of player that Devontae Adams is, but we don't know the kind of player that Devontae Adams is in Vegas. Uh, there's so many times where you see top tier wide receivers change teams, and you're like, oh yeah, he's gonna kill it on this new team, and then he doesn't. Now, granted, there's guys like Stephon Diggs where you're like, there's no way he's gonna be as good as he was in Minnesota. Then he goes to the Bills and he's better. Like there is that kind of potential, but then there's the DeAndre Hopkins potential where he's still good on the Cardinals, but he's not as good as he was in Houston, which is crazy to say because Houston was worse. And I just feel like it's the changing of teams, whole new quarterback, whole new system he has to learn. He's not getting any younger. He's in his 30s. And you also got to think when he was in Green Bay, I mean, look at the situation they're in now. Devontae Adams leaves, and you're like, okay, who are they going to throw to? Well, that's where they were then. Devontae Adams was the only target. Now he's got Darren Waller there, one of the best tight ends in the league, and he's also got everybody's favorite uncle, Hunter Renfro, just chilling across the way. Doesn't look like a football player, but the guy's good, and he's earned the targets. So I just feel like he's going to lose some touches. Still a great player up there at 6. Definitely not a bad pick, but I don't think he's going to be the same Devontae Adams we saw the past few years.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like, I'll be honest with you, if Devontae Adams was still in Green Bay, he'd be my wide receiver 1, hands down, no questions asked. Because he sees the targets, he got the targets. And that's the big unknown with him in Vegas. Now he does have the connection with Derek Carr. They put up all kinds of crazy stats in college together, but that was 7 years ago. So they'll need a little bit of time to rekindle that. There is some options around him that might cause some issues, but they still paid him to be the highest paid wide receiver. So I think he'll still get his. That's why I am right dab in the middle. If you average out George and Tyler, I'm at 4. And I think he's still a solid player and will be a steal at the top of the second round if you can get him there. So I still love Devontae Adams a lot. Don't take number 4 as not a great player.
You did say that basically your top 5 is interchangeable. And number 5 on our list is also your 5th on yours. I'm at 5 as well. Tyler up at 3, Stephon Diggs. And I guess I'm not shocked because Tyler literally did just mention Stephon Diggs and talked about how he went to Buffalo and got better. So I know it was a bit of a down year in a way for Diggs last year. There's a rebound coming, I guess, Tyler, isn't there?
I still think Diggs is a solid player. No, he didn't put up the numbers that we saw 2 years ago last year, but he still put up solid numbers. Josh Allen's a gunslinger. Look, like Cody said, I think the top 5, or in my case, the top 6 are all interchangeable, in my opinion. So if I'm going to compare in a way, I'll just take my number 4 guy, Jamar Chase. Like I said, Chase has Boyd, he has Higgins, he has Mixon, all these guys over there that have these mouths to feed. The Bills, they're not a running team. Yes, they drafted another running back, but until they prove to me they're a running team, they're not a running team. And they don't have Cole Beasley anymore. So it's just Gabriel Davis, Dawson Knox, Stephon Diggs. Like, it's just those 3 guys, less mouths to feed.
Doing dirty to Jamison Crowder.
I'm not a big Jamison Crowder fan, but I guess that's a debate for another day. Yeah, I just think Diggs is going to see the targets. He's a great player. He's a solid guy. He's somebody you can rely on. And maybe it's just a little bit of bias because he helped me win my first championship in many years in the league. But yeah, honestly,
you're not drafting him in round 12 like you were that year.
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah, there was some crazy value on him that year, and we're not going to go into your trade again. But no, Stephon Diggs is solid. I think last year was a little bit of an anomaly. Like, he's still a top 5 wide receiver, obvious by our rankings. It's just that offense is going to score points. I like what Tyler said about the thinning of the wide receiver room a little bit. I'm right with you, even though I have him a little bit lower. It's all kind of interchangeable at this point.
Can we also stop saying kind of like a down year? He finished as wide receiver 7. Like, It
It's
wasn't
just
like
a
he was
down year where he gets started. He was like a top. I think it was a top 3 the year before.
maybe, but like if I pull it up quick, he finished as wide receiver 1 in 2020, so that makes sense.
There you go.
Uh, well, actually, that was in the postseason because that's when this app likes to change thing. He was 3, so still he went down a few spots, but he still saw option there. I just didn't want to take. It sounds like we were saying he like dropped all the way to wide receiver 2 and we're expecting this big comeback. And no, he's still a good player, and that's why he's still up there. It's not. He's definitely deserves it. But like I mentioned, for me, the top 5 is tier 1. For me, then we get to tier 2. Tyler did have his top 6, and number 6 on our list is Deebo Samuel, the guy that plays wide receiver and the running back position, but doesn't want to play the running back position anymore. So kind of held out. So maybe that's why he's a little bit lower, but still a very good player. But Tyler, why is he in your top 5?
I feel like the only reason he's this low is because he is asking for a trade. I feel like otherwise he would be a top 3 guy because he's just so versatile. And, the 49ers just want to use him. Even if he doesn't play running back again this year, they're still going to get him in the short game. They're going to get him in the long game. They're going to get him in the mid game. They're going to get him involved somehow. And I still feel like there's going to be some running plays with him because it worked too well last year not to use him uh, as a running back in some way. I think anytime a team is forcing the ball into a guy's hands that much until he shows that he has too many injuries and we can't trust him, I think he's got to be up there. He's the wide receiver version of Christian McCaffrey, in my opinion. Because McCaffrey's another guy that's just like they want to use him, they'll force him into the game. And I think that's what Debo is at receiver.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I'm right with you. I don't see them completely erasing his carries, but I have him lower. Like he was a top 3 finisher in points and average points last year. He kind of fell down to that like beginning of the second tier for me because I'm not sure if he's going to get those touches in the running game that he did last year. Obviously, they're probably going to try to get him more catches just to keep the ball in his hands because he is the leader on that offense. But anything that is a downgrade in touches makes me just very slightly concerned, but he's definitely still going to get his, and he's 6th in my ranking. So you see, I'm not really down on him. It's just that's where I'm at. That's why he's not in my top 3 like he was last year.
makes sense. I'm right there with you. But number 7 on our list is CeeDee Lamb. We have him at 7 overall. I do have the highest at 6th. Again, we're just nitpicking in this tier 2 or tier 2 group of wide receivers. Man, that was a lot more complicated than it needed to be. But they lost Amari Cooper. They got rid of him. CeeDee Lamb will be the true number 1 guy. I think this could be a really big breakout year. I think CeeDee Lamb is like a sneaky candidate to finish wide receiver 1, just because of the volume and the targets that he might see without Amari Cooper there. And also tease, I like Dalton Schultz a lot too, to fill in some of those voids of targets. I think he'll be a steal in mid rounds. But you have to wait for 2 weeks when we talk about tight ends for that one. But yeah, CeeDee Lamb, valuable player. Losing Amari Cooper, high-powered offense. They like to throw the ball. I don't think you can go wrong with him either.
No, absolutely not. CeeDee Lamb's a solid player. I also think it's worth mentioning that we all agreed that Zeke has taken a big step back. He's definitely fallen in the rankings. If Zeke's not going to perform to the level that he has before, I feel like they're going to throw the ball more, even if Tony Pollard is getting a lot of carries. I think they're going to throw the ball more, throwing the ball more with less targets going to Amari Cooper with him not being there. I think that just means CeeDee Lamb's value is just going to be boosted. But let's go ahead and talk about the guy that's next on the list. He's 8th in our rankings. Cody and I both have him 8. George has him 9. But this is a guy we kind of hinted at during the intro today, and that's Mike Evans. And I personally believe, like George, I'll let you say your piece, but I personally believe that he's going to be solid this year. Gronk and Mike Evans were the 2 go-to guys for touchdowns on Tampa Bay. Yes, Mike Evans can become touchdown dependent. There is a random points in the season where he might only put up 2 points, but I don't think that's going to happen as much this year. Chris Godwin's going to miss the beginning of the season most likely, and then On top of that, you don't have Gronk stealing touchdowns anymore. That's just more touchdowns for Evans. I think he's going to have a really, really good year. And honestly, every year Mike Evans has a good year, but every year we kind of sleep on him a little bit.
I think a lot of why we sleep on Mike Evans is the inconsistency thing. And yeah, you did say it how yeah, he does get touchdown dependent at times because a lot of times is because they had a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. I saw something on Twitter the other day where it was like, hey, he could be a top 3 wide receiver because yeah, there's no more Gronk now and Chris Godwin missed the beginning of the year, there's no more Antonio Brown. But I still like he's been in the league for a long time and he's always been that guy that's very good, always gets 1,000 yards, always is a solid fantasy player, but he's going to score you 2 points 3-4 weeks in the season. So that's why I always keep him lower. I think 9 might be the highest I've had Mike Evans in my rankings, in at least my memory, because he's almost always seems to be around like that 12, 13, 14 for me when I can remember. So putting him at 9, I didn't think I was going to be that low. You two at 8, I'm basically right with you guys, but the only thing that concerns me with making him a wide receiver 1 is I want to pair him with another wide receiver soon after, just because I hate the inconsistency. It's come to bite me in the past, and that's why I still have a sour taste in my mouth from Mike Evans even to this day.
Yeah, I hear it. And I think, maybe you overvalue those a few weeks that, he might score, only a few points because there's a lot of weeks where, top players uh, don't put up those points we're used to. They're sub 10 points. It happens. That's a part of fantasy football. And you have to go all the way back to 2017 when Mike Evans wasn't a top 12 number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football. So he's been consistent. He's been valuable. He's been top 10 every year that he's been with Tom Brady. They have Tom Brady back this year. Now, if you would have said, Tom, you got to worry a little bit about the Tom Brady falling off a cliff. You're retired, come back. We've been saying that for years. This might finally be the year. Probably won't be, but I can understand some hesitancy around that. But yeah, Mike Evans, just a solid guy, and he doesn't have much competition at the beginning of the season. Yes, Chris Godwin will be back at some time. I know they're really high on Russell Gage after OTAs, but last year he was fighting snaps between Rob Gronkowski, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, and was still getting his. He's going to come out hot this season. He might be a guy that you draft and then try to trade midseason once Chris Godwin comes back. Not a bad option, but I do really like Mike Evans heading into the season as well.
Yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up him, and we can move on to our next wide receiver. This is a man that took a fall in our rankings from last year or from the last few years, and it's because of a change of teams. That is Tyreek Hill at number 9. I have him at 8, Cody at 9, Tyler at 10. So we're all pretty much still right there, but definitely the Tua effect taking a hit on Tyreek Hill. We still obviously have him as a wide receiver 1. The man is really good with the ball in his hands. They can just give him a lot of short passes that we know Tua can still hit, and he can take a ball to the house, but it's not Patrick Mahomes back there throwing the ball anymore. So that hesitancy in the big play ability, it's nothing a hit on Hill, but a hit in the offense being able to execute it is why I have him further down than we've had him in a long time in fantasy.
All right, I got a question. If that video on Twitter didn't come out, where would Tyreek Hill be?
Same spot for me. The video on Twitter definitely didn't help because he was severely underthrown. If you guys haven't seen the video, it's a video of they're making connections in practice, and it's Tua just absolutely giving it his all into a throw and underthrowing Tyreek Hill. Yeah, it wasn't a pretty video. I'm surprised they posted it. They seem proud of it though. I still would have him around the same spot. Like I had the lowest out of the 3 of us at 10, and that's saying a lot because you guys know I'm a huge Tyreek Hill fan. I bought his T-shirt a few years ago until I gained a ton of weight, and now I don't fit it anymore.
Still wore to the Super Bowl party anyway, and I appreciate that dedication.
Oh yeah, tight on the stomach the whole Super Bowl, but that's fine. It was worth it. But yeah, Tyreek Hill, he's a speedster. Yes, he can get the ball in his hands in the short game and break something. But at the same time, so can Jalen Waddle. So it's 2 very similar receivers on the same team. So when Tyreek Hill was the guy that was getting almost all of those plays in Kansas City, he might not get almost all of those plays in Miami. I think a lot of his game is going to rely on still getting that deep ball, and I'm not sure I trust Tua that much to get him the deep ball. Um, I know it sounds like I'm taking a big old dump on Tyreek Hill. I still have him in my top 10. I still think he's going to be good. I just would not expect him to be the guy we've seen the last few years.
Yeah, I think there'll be some weeks where he'll be wide receiver 1 on the week just because he'll have that breakaway 75-yard touchdown. Like, the talent didn't go there. It's the expectation of the offense. Mike McDaniel, their new head coach, comes from the 49ers background that still likes to run the ball. It's not Andy Reid, who's like, oh, it didn't work on the first try, we're not doing anything. Like, so they're still going to run the ball. It'll be, a lot more short game. Maybe they'll use him a little bit like a Deebo Samuel, and we saw how productive Deebo was in that role. So we could see some carryover from that, which is why I think he's still a top 10 wide receiver for us. But there is definitely some fall off we expect coming out of Kansas, or with him leaving Kansas City.
Yes, and a man I don't think we expect a lot of fall off from last year is our number 10 wide receiver on the list, and that is Keenan Allen of the LA Chargers. Cody has him at 11, Tyler at 9, me at 10. I'm going to save my comments for a little bit later on who Cody might have ranked higher than Keenan Allen. I think that'll still be the show, so that's good. But the man is now paired up with Justin Herbert, and that offense was just clicking last year. So I don't see any reason why Keenan Allen can't stick right on that borderline wide receiver 1 territory that he's been at for the last, I think, 4 or 5 years of his career now, it seems like. You guys have anything to add?
No, I just think Keenan Allen's solid. I'm the highest on him out of everybody here. I think he's a lot like Mike Evans. I've always attributed the two of them together, where every year they're both just solid. Um, they're always top level wide receivers, and yet every year nobody really talks about them. Like, oh man, I hope I get Keenan Allen. Like, nobody ever says that. Nobody ever says it for Mike Evans either. Yet every year both of them are solid, top tier wide receivers. So I think you could do a lot worse than Mike Evans. Keenan Allen. Oh, you could do a lot worse than either one of them. You could do a lot worse than Keenan Allen if he's your wide receiver 1. I think that's fine, especially because that probably means you stacked up on some running backs. And if he's your wide receiver 2, you're killing the draft. So
What if he's your
I
wide
think he's
receiver
solid.
3?
Wide receiver 3,
Then you're
like,
Cody
you might as well
Roadcap.
just grab the championship now and run with it. I don't know. I got to see your running backs at that point. You probably don't have any if he's your wide receiver 3. But I think that's enough on Keenan Allen. Let's go ahead and move on to the next guy. We finally got to somebody. This is the second wide receiver for this team already on the rankings. We're only at 11, and that's T. Higgins for the Bengals. Me and Cody have him at 12. George has him at 11. We're really expecting the Bengals to throw the ball a lot, aren't we?
That, and I think we're also really expecting Tyler Boyd to have a drop off because, like I said, last year, you could really see Jamar Chase taking that wide receiver one role, and then it was like, oh, a toss up for the wide receiver 2, and then now here we are having T. Higgins up here at 11. That's kind of a bold statement, but I think that just seems to be like the handshake rule of everybody is T. Higgins is also a young wide receiver who is taking a step, and he's going to be that solid wide receiver too. They lost CJ Uzama at tight end, so there's a couple more targets that may be coming out there as well. The offense is going to score points.
Yeah, but
I
they got
know
Hayden
that
Hurst. I don't know if Hayden Hurst is really that much worse than CJ Uzama. They're both kind of mid-tier tight ends.
that's fair. I mean, I guess we really haven't seen a chance for Hayden Hurst to be a true tight end 1. If I'm remembering right, he went to Atlanta the same time they drafted Kyle Pitts, so he didn't really have that year as a tight end 1. Maybe he will step up and be just good as CJ Uzama. That's possible, but even yet, T. Higgins, if he can secure that role from Tyler Boyd, I don't see any reason why he can't be wide receiver 11, wide receiver 12, right around where we have him in our rankings, because he is another big play threat on an offense that's going to put up points.
Definitely. And, I'm just going to circle back to Keenan Allen real quick because T. Higgins wouldn't be my first double up if we were going just based off of my rankings, but that's not how it fell during the consensus rankings because Keenan Allen is actually my second Chargers wide receiver, but we'll talk about that other guy in a minute. But back to T. Higgins. I do understand the hesitancy with Tyler Boyd, but if you look back to last season, between weeks 13 and 16, he like really came alive
T.
as the
Higgins,
number
you
2
mean,
guy.
by the way.
Yes, T. Higgins is the guy that really came alive between weeks 13 and week 16. He did have a dud week in week 15 with only 2 points, but we talked about Mike Evans, so he'll give you that everything. And then week 16 with Jamar Chase, he still put up 31 points. So like he has that upside to like have extreme boom potential while being a solid number 2 option. They drafted him pretty high as well. He is the number 2 on that team, a high-powered offense that got Joe Burrow some protection. So we might see them, not rely on the run so much because they can now protect Joe Burrow. Like they had to run so much to like keep that pass rush, honest. And now that they can have Joe Burrow stand back there and just deliver, I think T. Higgins is some solid value. It is very rare to see, multiple wide receivers in the top, 12. And I did it twice and we did it once.
Yeah. And one more point on T. Higgins before I move on, and it's not really a point on T. Higgins. It's we have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins both ranked in the top 12. We're saying that Tyler Boyd is still going to be a solid wide receiver. Joe Mixon catches a bunch of passes. Hayden Hurst, we're talking, could be just as good as CJ Uzama was. And yet in our rankings, we have Joe Burrow ranked 7th at quarterbacks. I don't know. We might have to revisit that a little bit because if they're this solid passing the ball, we're expecting this much production out of the wide receivers. We might have to revisit that, but we will later. Um, let's go ahead and move on to our next wide receiver first. And I hate to put a Colts wide receiver this high up in the rankings, but he had a solid year last year. We'll see if he can reciprocate it or even build on it, and that is Michael Pittman. Cody and I both have him at 13, George at 12. So we're all pretty much around the same rankings for Michael Pittman. You guys have anything you want to say about him?
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Late Round Flyer jumping in here and making the top 12. Honestly, the move to Matt Ryan from Carson Wentz last year, a lot of people would see as an upgrade. I don't see anybody that would at least see it worse than a lateral move. And this man was just consistent last year. Maybe he wasn't the most flashy wide receiver because there was a lot of weeks where he put up 10 and that was it. But especially if you're going to have him as a wide receiver too, and he can do that again, that's pretty solid. But one question I have for you. So say the Raiders did not trade for Devontae Adams. Michael Pittman and Hunter Renfrow were very similar last year with how they broke out. Is this around where you would have Hunter Renfrow too, or would you have had, like, which one would you have had higher?
If Devontae Adams didn't go to the Raiders?
Yes.
I just have Hunter Renfrow higher.
Yeah, I would too, honestly.
That's
He's
interesting
everybody's
to
favorite
me.
uncle, so
I mean, that does make sense.
Hunter Renfrow,
but
like the second half of the season, was like a top 3 wide receiver. Like he had over 100 some targets, multiple catches. Like he was a go-to guy, and I think if you look based on where we're at, on wide receivers, I have Hunter Renfrow a lot higher on my wide receiver ranking still than I do the next Colts wide receiver. So
the next Colts wide receiver in comparison of talent to the next, to Hunter Renfrow is probably not really much of a competition, though.
I mean, that's true. It's just Hunter Renfrow was Mr. Consistency last season. He was an explosive player. The only reason I don't think he got the recognition was because he was on a Raiders team that really didn't do a whole lot. And he had Derek Carr throwing him the ball. I mean, Derek Carr did fine, but you're talking about Derek Carr compared to Carson Wentz on a new team. You're talking about the Raiders that nobody cares about versus the Colts, which are a fairly popular team. So it's difference in opinion. But I think Renfro just didn't get the recognition he deserved last year. And if Devontae Adams wasn't there, I think he would, have a great season. But I still think he's going to have a great season. But let's go ahead and move on to the next one because this is the one I'm really interested to get to. I can't believe I have him ranked the highest, but apparently I do.
Are
It
you
is
really
AJ
surprised though?
Brown. It's AJ Brown. It's not a homer pick anymore because he's not on the Titans anymore. But we don't talk about it. The new Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver AJ Brown. Cody has him at 17. George at 13. I have him at 11. I just think AJ Brown's a solid wide receiver. He wasn't on a team that was going to throw the ball a whole lot, and yet he still put up big numbers with the Titans. He's still a solid wide receiver. My biggest question with AJ isn't going to be is he going to get the targets? Is he going to get the playing time? My big question with him is he going to stay healthy? AJ isn't known for having big injuries, but he is known for having these nagging injuries that make him miss a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks and multiple times. Last year, you could have watched it, and it was like pretty much every single game, at least once, you saw AJ Brown laying on the field, holding his knee, his elbow, his shoulder, something. And he just wasn't able to finish the game then, but he would come back next week. Those injuries make me nervous, sometimes more than the big injuries, because you don't know when to expect them. You don't know when they're going to happen. It's not like he gets injured and he's going to be out a few weeks. He's back the next week, and you're like, do I start him or do I expect him to be out in the third quarter again? That's what worries me with AJ, but he's still a solid pick. He's got Devontae Smith taking away some of the coverage over there. So it's can Jalen Hurts get him the ball, and I think he'll get him the ball enough to make him a very productive wide receiver too.
Yeah, I don't think that AJ Brown is Tyreek Hill in any extent, but I think a lot of the situation where AJ Brown's going to get his points is similar to what I said that Tyreek Hill is going to do. Like, you don't really necessarily have to throw him the ball down the field, even though like he is more of a jump ball wide receiver than Tyreek Hill is, but he has the ability to take a short pass and break it for a long play. And honestly, even though he did get a bit of a downgrade at quarterback, at least from a passing standpoint, he has a better supporting cast around him in Philadelphia than he did in Tennessee, considering he only played one or two games with Julio Jones. But there's going to be a lot less coverage they can put on him with Dallas Goedert next to him, with Devontae Smith across from him. So it's just going to be up to, can Jalen Hurts get him the ball? Obviously, we're more down than we would have been if he would have stayed in Tennessee. So there's a really good chance that he could beat this number 13 ranking. Although Cody at 17 really thinks that he's going to underplay this 13 ranking.
Oh, 100%. And it's not what, I understand when he's on the field, he's a solid wide receiver, but that's the big thing. When he is on the field, I mean, he played in 13 games last year, whether he was fully healthy or not, finished as wide receiver 32. He played in all 16 games in his rookie year, but he only started 11 because he was a rookie. And then he only played in 12 games the year before that. So, he has an injury history. It's definitely scary. Tyler brought up a very interesting point. We're talking about all these Bengals players and how we have Joe Burrow lower, but we have Jalen Hurts higher. So and you would think, well, why wouldn't you have AJ Brown higher? Well, that's because in fantasy football, the running quarterback is definitely a cheat code. And that's another knock is this Eagles team likes to run the ball, whether that's with their, platoon of running backs or whether that's with Jalen Hurts. I think this can be a very week to week, comparison. Oh, this is a Devontae Smith game. This is a AJ Brown game. Like I don't love the consistency there. And that's not a knock on AJ Brown, but with his health, with the lack of consistency, with Jalen Hurts getting to 3,000 yards would be like a solid season for him. And when you have Dallas Goedert, Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, like they're plus all the running back targets that he's going to throw, like there's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. So it's AJ Brown's a great player. Like they paid him the good money. He has to stay healthy, which is a big question mark. He hasn't done it the last two seasons. And I don't trust Jalen Hurts throwing the ball.
Man, I mean, you had me until you're like, I think it might be a situation where it's a Devontae Smith week and then an AJ Brown week, because you're also the lowest of the three of us on Devontae Smith. So I think it's more of you really don't trust Jalen Hurts, and that was a bit of a cover.
No, I can be the lowest if I'm the lowest on AJ Brown and I'm the lowest on Devontae Smith because of Jalen Hurts, my evaluation on him. But that doesn't mean I don't think it's some weeks it could be a Devontae Smith week and take him out of the equation. Like they go hand in hand.
It's like significantly lower.
Well, he's not the only one that we have big differences about, and he might not be our biggest argument either. So let's go ahead and move right to the next guy. Number 14, George tried hinting at it earlier. Cody tried hinting at it earlier, so we might as well have just said his name, but it's Mike Williams, the other Chargers receiver. Cody has him at 10. I have him at 15. George at 16. Cody, he's a wide receiver 1 in your book. Tell us why.
Well, he did finish as a wide receiver 1 last year. He did do that. He got the big contract. They paid him the money that he was earned for that. He finished number 10 last season. And, I have him one spot ahead of Keenan Allen, which Keenan Allen's still a very solid player. I think the Chargers offense is going to be, really electric. It's going to be competing for a top offense in the NFL. So I think they can definitely support two number one wide receiver options. But with Mike Williams, between the contract, what he, he did take a little bit of dip, but how fast he started, and then he started to pick it back up in the second half of the season, despite the dip in the middle. Definitely looking for a little bit more consistency there, but I think he has the full potential to do that. And he didn't get moved, but there was some rumblings about, moving Keenan Allen this offseason because he's getting up there in age because of his contract and stuff like that, which, he's still there. So you have to 100% agree with that, but you have to think they're willing to move on from a guy like Keenan Allen because of how much trust they have in Mike Williams. So that's why I have him as a wide receiver one. I mean, I can understand if you don't think so, but he did do it last year, and they paid him. So definitely something to keep an eye on.
The biggest thing that I don't love about Mike Williams is how he started off the season on fire. And I think if that continued, I don't think there's much doubt that I would also have him higher than Keenan Allen. But he really sputtered off in the second half of the year. Like, did defenses figure him out? He never really, before last season, was more than a one-trick pony, deep ball kind of wide receiver. And then last year, he did start to put his game together, and then it just stopped. So I don't see how you can put him higher than Keenan Allen. I obviously still think he's a solid wide receiver. I have him at a higher end wide receiver 2 here, even though I'm the lowest on him out of the three of us at 16. But Keenan Allen is the reliable guy who has done it for years. He is the hands guy. Mike Williams is going to be more inconsistent. So I think I'm just kind of confused about how you have him one spot higher, but I think having them close makes sense.
He finished higher in targets, receptions, fantasy points per game, and total fantasy points than Keenan Allen last year.
What numbers are you looking at? Keenan Allen had 13.1 points per game to Mike Williams 12.4.
Okay. I have it as 13.1 to 12.8 in half point PPR.
Are you week 1 through 18 or 17? Because we don't play week 18.
I'm the whole regular season.
Okay.
Because we might not play the week 18, but people still do play week 18. And that doesn't
even yet. It's nitpicking, I guess, but it is also pretty close. But
and more targets and more receptions.
All right. Well, as fun as this is to watch, I could watch you guys argue all day. I mean, most days you do, but I think it's time to move on to our final guy in the rankings for at least for today. Next week, you will hear 16 through 30. Knowing us, we will probably get to 30 and be like, we'll wait one more guy. We'll wait one more guy. We'll wait one more guy. And we'll end up talking about a lot more. But I digress. Number 15, DJ Moore of the Carolina Panthers. Kind of a rough start last year to the season, but still a solid year. He has been consistent in the past, so hoping he can recreate his consistency. I have him at 17. George has him at 17. Cody at 14. Cody, what's your take on DJ Moore?
He's just a guy. He's probably closer to your 17. I'm not gonna lie. I probably am a little bit higher on him, but I just like what he brings to the field. It's a guy I root for. He did finish 19th last year with the carousel quarterbacks. They're going to have another carousel quarterbacks with Sam Darnold, Corral, and possibly Baker Mayfield if that deal ever comes to fruition. And I do think if they get Baker Mayfield, it's a guy that, could get a little bit of an uptick, but they paid him this year. He is the number one guy. And I also think last year going into the season, I was a lot higher on Robbie Anderson, his running mate, and I'm a lot lower on Robbie Anderson this year. I think DJ Moore will get some uptick, and I do think the return of Christian McCaffrey will also help that offense and not make him the true focal point. And I think he has that big playability that you look for in your, wide receiver 2 range.
He definitely showed his ability to be a wide receiver 1 last year at the beginning of the year because he was setting the world on fire the first few weeks. And then, the quarterback carousel happened. Christian McCaffrey went down. It all got stacked against him. I think if Baker Mayfield does move to there, at least early enough that they can get a rapport and they have some stability at quarterback, he is definitely someone that's going to raise up my rankings. He'd be probably a borderline wide receiver 1 on my rankings if that happens, but I don't see it happening, and at least it's not there right now. So that's why I have him down at 17. I love his potential. He's just a top talent stuck in a mediocre situation.
Yeah, he's a guy that if I get him as my wide receiver 2, I don't hate it. I'm not absolutely in love with it either. But if I get him as my wide receiver 3, thrilled. He would be an unbelievably good wide receiver 3. Wide receiver 2, he could still be very solid and win you some games. Again, it's just not somebody I'd be absolutely thrilled with. But yeah, guys, that's our top 15 wide receivers. Kind of excited to get to next week and talk 16 to 30, but the people at home are just going to have to wait. Or are they?
No, they're going to have to wait. They're going to have to wait because, as always, we want to thank you for checking out another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. But the next the next week's episode will probably get a little bit more heated than the end of this segment. So definitely make sure you stay tuned.
Yeah, definitely. If you like that Mike Williams talk, I got more for Cody next week.
You don't have to wait if you go on our website, which is what I was getting at.
That is very true.
That's where I was going with that. I wasn't saying let's do the next 15 right now. I was saying if you don't want to wait to find out who our 16 through 30 is, you can go on our website. You can talk some smack to us on social media too. Go check out our TikTok. Do a stitch with my current TikTok. Do the same filter. Let me know who you get. I want to see what team it picks for you. I got the Browns. I'm not thrilled with it. So let me see who you guys get. Either way, this podcast is much more fun for us and more fun for you if you get involved.
Yes, it is, Tyler, and let's hope you all don't face the potential year-long suspension like Tyler does. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of the Couch GMs podcast. For Tyler Snyder and Cody Roadcap, I'm George Kerth, and we'll see you all next week.